Hello and welcome to Green Pass Gaming Sunday Halloween special. It's Halloween today. It's not too often you get to actually go broadcasting on a day like Halloween, but today here we are. We've got a bit of a special show later on coming up with the Halloween Confessionals and some of the games that we've been playing around Halloween and what scares us and stuff. But before we get into any of those things, let's just give you a very brief rundown of today's topics. And they're in no particular order, so let's whiz through them if we can. First up is probably we're going to be talking about whether PlayStation are actually starting to speed up their PC releases. Obviously, this week it's been announced that I can't remember the game that's coming now. What's the game that's coming? Little Big Planet. Little Big Planet's coming to PC, and as we know, that wasn't released too long ago. So makes me wonder if they're actually starting to speed up some of these PC releases. Halo campaign launched video 6 minutes. We got to see the campaign. I think it was only in last week's show that we were actually wondering whether they were going to save it for the 20th anniversary edition on the 15th of November, but no. They've actually shown us a little bit more of the campaign early, so we'll be going through that, and perhaps we'll flash the video up on the screen as we go through that as well. Third topic of this evening, are we actually currently in the golden age of gaming? Will we at some point in the future look back to these times that we're currently in now and think, actually, this was the golden age of gaming? And we'll be diving into that and delving into that and some of the reasons possibly why we might actually be in the golden age. And to close off the show, we will be going into our Halloween confessionals. This is where this chat have the best chance to get involved in the show and let us know some of the games that you've been playing, some of the things that have scared you the most, jump scares, all of those kind of things, and we'll be delving into those. But before we do any of those crazy things, let's introduce the rest of the panel. And first up, as always, Puxley, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you, and what have you been up to this week?
Evening, Flap, yes, and evening, chat. I'm not doing too bad, thank you. Pretty busy work week this week, so I haven't had an awful lot of time for gaming. And I think the main thing I have been playing throughout the week on Xbox has been Battlefield 5. Really enjoying that still, leveling up my assault class. I finally ranked that up to level 20 and got a certain gun, which is really cool, and just been having a blast with that in my spare time. Apart from that, strangely enough, this might sound bizarre, had my cousin around over the weekend, and he brought his 3DS, and a number of years ago, we both each repurchased Pokemon Gold and Silver each on our respective machines. About, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, he came round and said, "Hey, do you want to pick this up again?" And we did. So a lot of yesterday evening, I was playing through some old school Pokemon Silver. But apart from that, nothing else, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's cool. I think it's been a bit of a busy week for all of us, to be honest, as we're probably about to find out. Scott, SX2, my friend, how are you? What have you been up to? Have you been gaming much this week?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much for that. Interestingly, this weekend I've managed to do a fair bit to be honest. Because the weather's not great. I think for the vast majority of us in the UK, it's basically pissed down all weekend here. So I've got back in Apex Legends and I've played a hell of a lot of Apex Legends this weekend. They've actually got a Shadow Royale mode for Halloween on there, which is pretty fun. It's nice to just have something a little different. I've been playing a little bit of Limbo, which I didn't play
nice.
first time around when that came out, which it caught me by surprise a little bit as to how brutal some of the deaths can be in that game. I've been dabbling in Dead by Daylight. Me and my friends tend to play a little bit of that around this time of year, which is cool. I'll probably touch on that a little bit more later in the show. So yeah, this weekend I've managed to play a fair bit, which is cool. So I'm looking forward to the show tonight. Got a couple of good topics. The confessionals are always a hell of a lot of fun on this, so that's going to be good.
No, I'm looking forward to this one. So, like I say, it's not every time we obviously get to broadcast when it's actually Halloween. So that's pretty cool that we can get into that. And you sounds like you've been keeping it topical with some spooky games. Cool. Luke, last up, my friend. How are you? What have you been up to this week? Got much game time in?
Well, a bit more than last week, and last week was not much, but mainly been playing Guardians of the Galaxy. Also kind of continuing to plow on with Metroid Dread as well, but that's slightly slow progress, if only because Guardians of the Galaxy is kind of taking me away from everything, really. Just quite surprised how good it is. and how much I love it. So, yeah, mainly just that, and it's kind of one of those earworm games, that you kind of keep thinking about and you really want to get back into when you're not on it. So that's as best a sign and as best an indication I can give to people of how good that game is. It's really, really, really good.
Yeah, I've heard lots of good reviews about it, and it's certainly on my to-do list. But we've got so many cool games coming. I don't know. I resisted. How long is it? How many hours have you put into it?
I don't actually know. So I think I've put in maybe 7. I don't think I'm anywhere near done story-wise with it. So I think maybe it's about 15 hours. But I think the really great thing about it is it's the perfect game for someone who is busy, because it is a linear action adventure game. There's no busy work. You're just going from place to place, doing your stuff, and it's super entertaining. So I would recommend it. If above all else, for that reason as well, if you are busy and there is stuff coming up, it's a good one just to get through. But it's terrific. It's actually that good. It's kind of in my game of the year thoughts so far. Really? So
I've heard a lot of people saying similar things, Luke, mate, which is really surprising. I think Avengers has done it a bit of a favor, if that makes any sense. I think expectations
were low.
Yeah, and so I think it's caught a lot of people off guard, and I think maybe a lot of people went into it almost expecting to be similar to Avengers. I seem to see a lot of people who are taken by surprise as to how it is such a linear game, and I think it's kind of fresh in some respects because of that. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people saying the same things, Matt.
Yeah, I think the biggest way I can compliment it is I think it comes as close to Spider-Man as any other Marvel game ever has, and I'd consider Spider-Man the greatest Marvel game ever made.
That's high praise.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if it's quite as good. I haven't finished it yet. My thoughts may change, and it is different. It's obviously a different game, but it's incredible. And I remember watching the first trailer for it and just not being interested at all, even though I'm a big Marvel fan, big Guardians fan. Just didn't think it looked particularly great, but once you start playing it, it's like, oh wow, this is actually really engrossing. Like, it's got a terrific story and really great voice acting, and combat's good. It's visually incredible. It's awesome. Music as well. Oh god, the music's amazing.
I've heard a lot of people doing the same that too.
Yeah, I've heard it's a bit slow at first. You have to put a few hours in, particularly the gunplay. The guns are a bit weak at first.
Yeah, I think so. So it has these kind of light RPG mechanics that revolve around the Guardians and Peter Quill, and you can upgrade kind of a bit. You can unlock abilities for all of them, and including Peter Quill. And at first, kind of you don't have many of those, and so combat can be, I guess, a little repetitive in that way. As you start to unlock more, you can kind of combo up, and there's a lot more stuff that comes out of that as well. And it is, I think, the thing to consider, it's really narrative focused. I think that's the thing when people say it's slow to begin with. It really tries to kind of get you into that world and that team where they are at that point in time, and so it focuses on that a lot, sometimes at the expense of combat or stuff like that, but I think it nails it really well. And then as you start going into it, it just gets crazy. So yeah, it's great. It's great.
Oh, I'm gonna have to buy it now, aren't I? Bastard.
Yeah.
I hadn't planned to buy this either. So okay, no, well, that's convinced me, to be honest. And like I say, I'd heard that it was a pretty good story and an overall game, and the combat system's pretty cool as well. So I'm gonna have to dive into that head first, I think. So excellent. Well, thank you very much, panel. Always a pleasure to have you on board. Chat. Happy Halloween. Thank you everyone for being here. We've got quite a few familiar names in the chat already. Yeah, it's just a very quick roll. Pyro, Matt D, Boardman Gamma, Maseko, Kaya Santi, welcome my friend, Wandering Dutch. Have we got any others? I think that's it for the time being. People tend to roll in as the show goes on. So thank you for being here, everyone. Get involved in the chat, and let us know what you think of tonight's topics. And we'll start with the first one, and perhaps we'll come to you first, Luke, if that's okay, being a fellow PS5 owner. PlayStation have revealed that they're bringing out Little Big Planet coming to PC, I think much sooner than most people realised. And as PlayStation franchises go, I appreciate it's not one of the biggest, and possibly probably quite a good game actually to bring to PC out of the sort of the launch lineup for PlayStation 5 and stuff. But yeah, what was your take on that? Do you think PlayStation might actually start speeding up some of their releases, or do you think they're going to try and hold back and let the PS5 hold its prestige on these titles for, I don't know, 12 months, shall we say, before considering releasing them to PC?
Is it Sackboy that's the game?
Sackboy, yes,
Sackboy,
that's the one.
Yeah, big
Yeah, sorry.
Has it actually been officially announced, or because I saw that there was a leak in the Steam database about it, but I don't know if Sony have actually come out and said, this is coming to PC.
I think it's just the Steam DB leak alongside the sort of the rebranding almost of PlayStation for PC on Steam.
Sackboy, big adventure.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, no, you're right. So no apologies, Sony haven't announced that, but it is very much pointing in that direction.
Yeah, seems inevitable at this point.
Yeah, if it's on Steam DB, it will be. So. I mean that game in isolation. So I've only played it. I have that game. I haven't played loads of it, but it is really fun. I can't imagine it was a huge seller for them even at launch. Like, it's not, platformers typically are lower selling games anyway. And it kind of seems reasonable that, I guess, a year out from launch, that's probably exhausted the audience it can grab on PlayStation 5 and 4 to some extent. So, when that's announced, that won't be surprising. Obviously, they've had the rebrand recently. I think before they were publishing their games under PlayStation Mobile or something like that on PC, which makes no sense. And so the brand change just makes sense purely from that perspective to reflect what they're actually doing. It's really hard to judge what their strategy is for it. I think everything that they've done so far indicates that they'll kind of, they're increasingly happy to put games on PC, but only kind of where they think that the captive audience on console has been exhausted and they can't really get many more sales from that. And you can see that with stuff like God of War, right? That's 3 years out from being released on PlayStation, and only now, or rather next year, it's coming to PC. And I think Horizon took a similar track, Uncharted, similar time frame. So I think maybe Days Gone was a bit quicker, if I remember. That came to PC a little bit quicker. So it seems like for now that's a strategy in terms of when they're releasing their games on PC. That's and it makes sense for them to do that because it's just extra money at that point. You're not impacting the console audience at all, because you released that game 3 or 4 years ago, and everybody who's bought it has already bought it. It makes sense to bring those games to PC because they'll do well. They'll stuff like God of War should be very successful on PC, particularly if the port's good. I mean, that's the real crux of the issue, as it were. The port has to be good. But I'm intrigued to see where they go with it, and if they start kind of lessening that gap as you suggested. So maybe you get, they'll start testing, okay, for this game, we'll release it on PlayStation 5 day one, and 12 months we'll release it on PC. And, I think they're in that experimentation mode where they're trying to see what impact that has on sales, on console, etc. And, will they do day and date? One day, probably, I guess, maybe. But I don't think it's really hard to predict when that's going to be.
So as a PlayStation 5 owner, and this is hypothetical, but if they were to release Ragnarok on both PlayStation 5 and PC simultaneously, which platform do you think you'd buy it on?
It's a hard question, isn't it? I think because I have this dilemma often with Xbox games, right? Where a game comes out, it's on Xbox and PC. It's like, where do I play it? And usually the answer is, well, I'll play it on PC because my PC is, can do more than my Xbox can, so I can really crank it up. Sometimes it's a comfort thing, right? I might just want to play the Xbox game elsewhere. I mean, it's a bit different for Xbox because I guess the issue that PlayStation has at the moment, and we don't know how they'll do this, is when a game comes to Game Pass day and date for Xbox and PC, you don't have to buy either of them. You just have them. So if you want to swap on the fly, you can do. I can't see. Certainly when Sony do this first time around, if they do, like in your Ragnarok example, I can't see them going, okay, well, if you buy the PlayStation 5 version, you also get the PC version and vice versa. Like, they're just not going to do that. It's going to be a choice. It's going to be, which one do you want? Go and buy that one. So I think I probably kind of 80% plump for the PC version, but it depends, because sometimes I really like sitting in front of the, on a settee and have the dual sense and 3D audio and kind of experience it that way. So, but I would probably go for the PC version in that case. Again, if the port was good.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Like you say, perhaps that's where things are heading. And I know lots of PlayStation only fans, let's call them, are very keen to keep obviously the prestige titles on the PlayStation platform, and perhaps not dilute them, shall we say, with them coming to other platforms, particularly early on in their life cycle. But just Pux and SX2, if we can come to both of you, not owning a PS5, if these games were to come to PC and you had a PC that could run them, is that where you would play them, do you think? Is this a good strategy by PlayStation to get people that don't necessarily have PS5 still on board with their games? Or do you think Sony should hold off and use this as a sort of a carrot for people to actually go out and purchase a PS5?
I personally think people are getting a bit more, I suppose, on point with regards to not necessarily running out for getting consoles anymore. I suppose games like God of War, and maybe I suppose PS5 specifically, I think Ratchet and Clank has been one of the main kind of bigger exclusives for the platform. And I love 3D platformers, right? As I've said many times before, so that's the kind of game that would definitely egg me on to get a PS5. Yet I'm in the mindset of, I suppose, having adult money is all well and good, but also having other responsibilities and stuff. It's like, well, I can't, as much as I'd love to, it's not necessarily the best investment, so to speak, for me to fork out 500 quid just for one game. Yet, as going by your hypothetical scenario, if I did have a PC that could 100% run it maxed out already, then I think fantastic. Yeah, I'll definitely play it on PC. But I suppose for me personally, having a PC in a different room to when my consoles are in my main living room, I suppose it usually depends on how I feel. But for the most part, I've actually gotten more used to jumping on Xbox now regarding to PC, just because I enjoy the extra comfort, and I like. I mean, I consider myself pretty technical, and I know what I'm doing with a PC. But at the same time, it can sometimes take so long getting things sorted out or done or whatever else. Whereas with an Xbox or any form of console, I just know it's going to work. And if anything, I did get to a point when I got my Xbox the first time round that almost like this sense of realization again that how great it is to have just this box that will play things with me not having to worry about it, or having to adjust settings and how to get it to run right and whatever else. So if I had a PC that could run stuff 100%, but for the most part, I think if I did have a PS5, I'd probably just go for the console, personally.
Okay, that's interesting. Scott, do you think really releasing these games on PC somehow sort of damages the prestige that they have on the platform for PlayStation?
I don't think so. But certainly not in the manner that they're releasing them at the moment.
No, it's quite slow, isn't it? I guess if they upped the pace, it could be slightly different.
Yeah, and I know Luke said that maybe they come day and day. I still, at this moment in time, I mean, never say never, right? You can't rule anything out. But at this moment in time, I struggle to see a time when Sony do release it. I do see that window shortening to maybe as low as 6 months.
Really?
Maybe 12 months would be more realistic. But I think what Sony have got is, if they continue to release them after the fact, they've got, I guess, the potential of double dippers as well. I suspect a lot of people who buy God of War for PC probably already own or have played God of War on a PlayStation 4. I say a lot. I imagine it is a certain portion of people who buy it on PC will likely have already played it, and they want to play it in, I guess, its best state. I think it's fair to say that God of War on PC will look a hell of a lot better than it did on PlayStation 4. So they kind of get the benefit of double dippers as well as keeping that prestige. So I kind of don't ever see them changing that method. But like I said, never say never. I mean, at some point, you would never have expected to see PlayStation games on PC at all, and yet here we are. So things do often change. Going back to your original question, no Flap. I think from my perspective, if Sony did start to shorten that window, then it would potentially impact my decision as to whether I'm going to get a PlayStation 5.
All right.
I'm at this moment in time, sorry, I'm kind of and and I mean, first of all, they're still virtually impossible to get at the moment, and I'm not sort of going to be spending my day watching Twitter account and Discords to try and get one. But if they did come to PC, say 6 months after release, then I probably would hold off. As someone who is in the market for trying to build a new PC, when or probably more importantly, if GPU prices ever come back down, I'll probably build a PC first, and then if those games start coming to PC a little bit shorter after launch on console, I'll probably just hold off buying the PlayStation 5. But I think from that perspective, Sony are going to get money from me regardless. Because if I get a PS5, it's very much is an if at the moment. While getting a PC is sort of something that I'll definitely do at some point in the future when I get the opportunity. So that they'll certainly get more money from someone like myself if they do release the games on PC. I think the issue that they might have though is, say for example, I mean, God of War's coming out next year, but God of War Ragnarok's coming out the same year, and I do wonder how many people will want to buy it on PC. Because if you wanted to play God of War, would you've already played it? But I imagine it's going to sell pretty well on Steam. I don't know if it's available to pre-order yet, but I can't really see a world where that or Uncharted 4 don't sell well on PC. I think Horizon Zero Dawn sold very well. I think Death Stranding sold moderately well.
I think Ghost of Tsushima would be interesting to see when that comes to PC, because I get the feeling that might be next, if I'm honest.
Yeah, the release, the way that they've kind of announced and the release dates that they're given has been a little bit odd, because they announced Uncharted Collection first, and then they announced God of War after. But God of War's come before Uncharted, so I wonder what the decision maker was behind sort of that messaging. Not that it matters an awful lot really, but it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. To be perfectly honest, and but I agree with you guys that I don't see a world where you can sort of buy on one and play on both, if that makes sense. That'd be pretty cool. But going back to the sort of the double dipping argument, I think they see sort of a massive, I guess, potential financial gain from those. I never see that happen. Plus, it would require them building a storefront on PC like Microsoft, which is probably more effort than it's worth.
Yeah, that's interesting. We've got quite a few fantastic comments actually coming, Puck. Should we just have a quick scan through the comments?
Yeah, sure thing. I'll read some of these out. Start from the top. So, Borman Gamer says, I think over the next 4 years, PlayStation games would be a day and date release on PC. They even made its own PC branding. Sante.
They've got Nixis as well on board now, haven't they, for ports and stuff. So whether they get the native studio to port it as they're making the game or whatever. But yeah, I mean, obviously Nixis are there to be able to port stuff that's already been released. But yeah, it's an interesting move by PlayStation. I personally think it's a good one. But
well, speaking of Nixis, I've got a comment here. Speaking of Nixis, comment here from Pyro M, who says, yeah, they acquired Nixis for a reason. I believe working in partnership with studios for eventual day and date releases, just that PS will slowly decrease the gap over time. Chaos Sante has said, definitely, this is regarding the question earlier when you mentioned, would you stay on PC buy for PC or get on PS5? Chaos Sante says, definitely PC for me, especially because all the PS5 features come to PC too, haptics and everything, and it's usually cheaper on PC. But Bullman Gamer says, to be honest, I'm console all the way, regardless if a game comes to PC. What else do I have? Another one here from Chaos Sante who says they just LLC'd the PlayStation for PC. That's telegraphing what's about to happen. Folks that don't see day and date are missing the signs.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's more of a matter of, probably when than if, I guess, to a certain degree. That seems to be
Mm.
the sort of general feel. But
We're coming in from Wandering Dutch, who says, "Yep, they will want to play them in the best lights possible. PC is the definitive version."
Yeah.
And I think final one here from Pyro M, who says, "Agreed with Kersenti, especially when you look at Jim Ryan's quote of reaching hundreds of millions of gamers. Quote from just over a week ago with objective reasoning."
yeah, that's true. And like you say, all of the signs are there. I struggle to understand why some PlayStation 5 gamers, obviously not all, wouldn't necessarily want these games to come to PC. I think they want to protect what they see as their platform, perhaps, and keep the prestige of these games. But, Sony are in it for the money. They're a business at the end of the day. And if they're going to make money out of it, then they will absolutely do it. But it's interesting that you said, Scott, that it might actually sort of deter you from buying a PlayStation 5. So, that's obviously probably in the psyche. That's something they're obviously weighing up and seeing if it is going to damage console sales or whether they make enough money from it to know.
Prior to that, actually.
Yeah. So, go on, Pucks.
Only because, I agree with that to an extent, but I suppose from a business perspective, if you're wanting to get hundreds of millions of gamers on board, but then, Scott said it earlier that currently the market for graphics cards for PCs is, astronomical. It's ridiculously expensive to the point no average person's going to fork out thousands of pounds for one. And if it's not looking like it's going to come anytime soon, then, and don't forget, graphics cards are only the start of it. You then got to consider, powerful processors, cooling, and all the rest of it, decent motherboards, whatever else. All that cost put together, you could buy like 2 or 3 PS5s for the general cost it will cost you to put together a decent rig that's going to last you a long enough time as well, without having to upgrade, say, every year. So even though
you can times that by 3, because don't forget, if you do have a rig that is that powerful, you can play Xbox games on it, you can play obviously Steam PC only games on it, and potentially PlayStation 5 games. In fact, the only kind of platform you probably won't be able to play those sort of games on will be Nintendo. So I'm guessing if you do have a PC, you rather than having one of each of the consoles plus a PC, if you can have a gaming rig that does it all, it could be a consideration, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. But then I suppose I'm kind of considering the global masses as well. At least in the UK, I think your the average yearly income in salary is like 27k, whatever it is. For them, and given how expensive it can be to live in the UK, as an example, I don't think many people are going to have enough money left over to buy a powerful rig. You might as well pay for a console, which is arguably cheaper, assuming obviously you can afford it in the first place. But whereas there's obviously other countries in the world. I think the US is a good example where the average salary there is about $57,000 a year. I think it is, which when you convert that to pounds, it's almost double already. So. Do you get what I mean? Like, depending on what territory you belong to, depends on if you can afford to have a rig which can do all that stuff and more, as you say, with Xbox, etc. So it's obviously a good plan. I don't disagree with it at all. I just think that the amount of people that will not buy a PS5 is very minimal. I think a lot of people probably still prefer to play on console, mainly from a cost point of view, as well as ease of use, I guess.
Yeah, the majority of people that probably wouldn't buy a PS5 are probably ones that have already got a fair rig anyway. So rather than having to start from scratch and buy a rig, they've probably already got one. It just means that they don't have to buy a PlayStation 5. Scott, you was going to say something, my friend.
Yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought now, actually. I think it was going back to sort of when I was saying how it would impact sort of potentially my decision to buy a PlayStation 5. But I think I'd be in the minority. I don't think necessarily bringing games to PC day and day would necessarily affect their hardware sales. That might be a fear of theirs. Obviously, the games are available at a good start based on sort of the most recent Microsoft financial earnings. Multi-platform games are selling well on PlayStation, despite also being available on PC. I was reading some data regarding third-party game sales from the likes of Ubisoft and CD Projekt Red, which showed the vast majority of their sales of games on the likes of The Witcher, and obviously various Ubisoft titles, if I remember correctly, were on PlayStation over PC, despite them having PC ports that were available day and date for these games, as far as I'm aware. So I don't see that being a problem. It might be something that they're concerned about. But I think a large part of it is Ksan is just put in the chat there that he says they want them to continue feeling special. And I think that's right. I think they want to be able to continue to say, like, look, only on PlayStation. These games are only available on PlayStation. And I think that's probably the main thing that they want to make sure they don't lose that message in the
It's a good
release
marketing
when they
tool.
release games on PC. Yeah, very much, very much so. And I think I think you just got to look at the fan base and sometimes the reaction of people when games are announced to come into PC. I mean, I'm not going to name certain people because I don't want anybody to look them up, but I've certainly seen certain takes on the internet where people have said, like, the day that they release games on PCs, the day I'm done with PlayStation, and stupid takes like that. And a lot of it just comes down to sort of their I guess their need to have that argument over Xbox or other platforms, which is a little bit sad. I'm sure Sony want to get the games in the hands of as many people as possible, as Jim Ryan recently said. But I guess they're just kind of weighing up sort of when that makes financial sense, because it is purely financial at this point, isn't it? But you look at how well the PlayStation 5 selling. They announced this week that it was up to over 30 million consoles sold. If they announce that God of War 2 is going to PC day and day, those sales aren't going to slow down. They're not going to slow down.
Yeah.
They're still going to sell out. So it'll be interesting to see if it happens. I personally don't see it happening day and date. I'm happy to say I'm possibly wrong with that, and I may be proved wrong. But I just think Sony would like to keep that almost prestige behind their games, where they can at least say for a certain period of time it's only on PlayStation, but I see that window shortening, definitely.
Yeah, I think PlayStation have got themselves a set of fans that are quite difficult to please. Whereas us, if you're an Xbox fan, particularly after the Xbox One generation, we'll take what we can get from Xbox as long as we think the brand is moving forward. We'll take what we can, and fingers crossed, it's all moving in the right direction, which thankfully I very much think it is with Xbox. But no, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, chat, as well. That was more of a conversation than I thought we'd probably get out of that one, to be honest. We've mentioned it a few times before. Apologies at the top of the show. Yes, Sackboy Adventure is the game I was talking about, and it's not necessarily been confirmed by PlayStation, although it is kind of very much writing on the wall. Thank you very much. Chat, thank you very much for being here. This is topic one at the moment. I just need to mention that this game footage, I've had to rip from YouTube. It's from very popular YouTuber Jack Frags. I'm sure most of you probably know him. I'll put a link to his channel and the video down below. But sadly, we were struggling to get some video footage for tonight, so I've had to rip some. A bit cheeky, but I will give him a shout down below in the comments. So let's quickly come to topic number 2. And this is the Halo campaign impressions we mentioned on last week's show. And we'll come to you first, Scott, if that's okay. On last week's show, we were kind of speculating that they might be bringing some more campaign footage, imagery and things like that with the upcoming 20th anniversary showcase on the 15th of November. But little did we know, a couple of days later, there it all was. We were going to be gifted with a 6-minute video running through and showing us and updating us with what's going on in the Halo Infinite campaign. I'm just going to quickly stick it on the screen now just so we can play that as we talk over it. What were your impressions, my friend? Do you think an extra year in the ovens actually paid dividends?
Yeah, definitely. I think I did watch this back earlier today, actually, ahead of the show, and I'm going to enjoy watching this again here, because it was a pleasant surprise, as you say, Flat. We kind of all just expected, right, we're not going to see anything until November 15th when they do the celebration stream, and then I think it was literally just a few hours after we finished the show when we were talking about that, wasn't it? They announced that they were going to do the campaign overview. It was very early on Monday morning. That it was very early for those in the States, at least, and I think there's probably two things that we can talk about here. I won't talk about them both, but first of all is the actual overview itself. But then secondly, I think the reaction to the overview as well,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think's been very, very, very interesting. So um I'd love to get Luke's take on this as well, because we had a little bit of chat about this in the Discord. So quick plug, if feel free to join Discord. I think the links in the description. But I thought it was a fantastic show, to be perfectly honest, and it kind of alleviated any fears that I had about the campaign. Personally, I should probably start by saying that I really wasn't somebody who looked towards the original showing overly negatively, though. I thought it looked, and when I say look, I'm kind of looking at the overall picture, not just graphically. But I thought what they showed looked good graphically. Yes, it needed work. Would agree there, but I think in terms of the gameplay that they showed, just the using the grapple hook, the different weapon variety, the overall scale and scope of the I guess it's not fully open world, is a semi-open world. Maybe it's a better way of putting it. I thought it looked great and got me really, really excited for this game. We spoke on last week's show about what got us into Xbox, and Halo CE what got me into online gaming in a lot of respects. And this almost seems to me, when I was, or how old was I when Halo 1 came out? Obviously I was in my early teens, I believe. This almost seems to be what I envisaged for Halo back then.
Okay.
I think Halo C had some great ideas, but I think it was obviously held back a little bit by the technology somewhat. And this almost seems to be kind of a full realization of the original vision for Halo, which is now possible on modern technology. And it's just got me super, super excited. I'm really excited for the story. I'm excited for the changes that they've made to the combat. The upgrades system is something that's completely new. I don't really know how to describe them. We've got the footage on the moment where he's kind of going to different landmarks and clearing out different areas of the map. That's got me really, really, really
Yeah.
excited. And someone who's interested in Halo lore as well. I'm in the middle of reading Shadow of Reach, which takes place between Halo 5 and Halo Infinite at the minute. I'm really excited to see where they go with the story. And they kind of introduced us a little bit more to the AI character called the Weapon. I imagine she's going to play a massive, massive part. And we saw a few of the boss encounters. There's one here on mini boss encounters. So I think there was a lot. I know it was only 6 to 7 minutes of footage, but in my opinion, they showed off a lot, and it got me super, super excited. And then, like I say, if you look at the fan reaction to that, I think it's been overwhelmingly positive as well. So I think they'll be pretty pleased with how it's landed.
No, absolutely, and I'm really pleased that it has been, because obviously, there is a certain element of the community that will hate on anything that's shown. But it's been massively positive. Luke, let's come to you next, my friend, our other resident Halo fan. Were you pleased with what you saw?
Yeah, for sure. I thought it's kind of the video they needed to do to get people a bit more excited for the campaign. And I tend to quite like these overview trailers, if only because they give you a bit more of an indication of some of the mechanics, or some of the broader mechanics in the game, which I think was a question mark around this, in terms of what's the structure like, how how we're going to go about progressing the story, sort of thing. So I thought it looked really good, actually, really, really good. And certainly, visually it's improved. It's not a huge upgrade or anything like that over the last one, but it was never going to be. But it is significant enough that you notice it, which is good. I feel like it's a weird game, because it looks much better in direct lighting than indirect lighting. And so there are some bits that you look at and it's kind of like, oh, that doesn't look great, and then there's other bits where it's in direct lighting and it looks fantastic. It looks really, really good. So it's a bit of but that's kind of just by the nature of it being open world, and it has dynamic time of day, etc. So but yeah, and I mean, in terms of the gameplay, I think it looks terrific. I mean, the first demo that they did looked great from a gameplay perspective anyway, you know, in terms of general movement. And obviously we've all played the multiplayer beta now, so we could actually get a feel for how it controls, and it plays fantastically, feels fantastic. So no concerns about that. And yeah, I don't know if I'm in a position where I've got no more concerns about the campaign, because you know, 343 have yet to make a campaign that's as good as any of the Bungie campaigns. But certainly I think this could be as good or come close to those kind of campaigns. And I mean, it'll be different because, you know, it is kind of not open world, but it seems kind of hub worldy, and you know, you're progressing sometimes in a non-linear fashion, and you know, there's all these kind of outposts and all that sort of stuff. The one thing, there were two things, one which is nitpicky, and I think I sort of mentioned this to Scott.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, so I'll mention that second. But the first thing that also I don't know how this is. Well, I think I know how it's going to work, in that it's not really going to be there as such. But it's a shame that it isn't, which is that in a game where you can tackle outposts, you know, and you can approach them from any angle, seems like, yeah, like Far Cry, God, like any Ubisoft game. It seems like there was a lot of scope there, and they haven't shown this, but a lot of scope there for like stealth approaches. It doesn't seem like you're going to be able to do that here. Like, I haven't seen any stealth weapons or any, you know, there's a bit in the trailer where he kind of has active camo on and hammers a brute. Or something like that. But
yeah, I don't think that's particularly stealthy, that though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he already
fires a rocket launcher.
Yeah,
Luke, are you just trying to get the chief to live out your fantasies as Sam Fisher again?
I want him to be able to break necks and all of that sort of stuff. So that's how desperate I am. That's how much I know that this rumored Ubisoft and Cell reboot is going to go really badly. So no, that's the one thing I was like, I don't know. It seems maybe a shame that they didn't put that in, but I guess, you know, it's Master Chief and he always confronts his problems head on. So maybe they just, you know, it's just not a fit for Halo. But anyway, that's a nitpick.
I think the only thing on that, Luke, is maybe in the trailer they did kind of show obviously the part where he's kind of scouting from afar and he's at least sniping to take out what appears to be kind of like a chained up set of Marines in something. That's probably the closest I think you'll get to. But obviously that's not something that's typically Halo, is it? I guess that's kind of more Halo trying to adapt to maybe having different play styles for the more open nature of Infinite. Sure. But that, I don't think Spartans are really called for stealth missions.
No. I mean, you know, they are super soldiers though, so they should be able to do some Sam Fisher stuff. But no, agreed. Yeah, that was the only bit. But then, yeah, it's kind of like the only problem with that is it wasn't stealthy because it's literally a non-silenced sniper rifle that you used to blow his head off, and then that's it. So, so that was the only thing. And then the only other nitpick I had, which I said to Scott, which was just that the world. It looks really nice. I have a real issue that it feels dead. Like there's no tree sway. There's barely any foliage sway. And like, it's only a really small thing. And I don't want to sound like I mean, everyone knows how much I love Halo. So I really am nitpicking here. But I think in a world where we've had so many incredible open worlds and hub worlds, you know, and you can think of like stuff like Red Dead and Ghost of Tsushima and all of these ones that have come out in the last few years, those worlds feel really, really alive, and not just because of the enemies and the allies in them, but because of all the other elements that combine. You know, all of this kind of, you know, wind impact that you see and weather changes, etc.
Yeah.
And it feels, from the trailer, it feels very sterile, apart from the changes in, you know, the sun movement and that sort of stuff. Again, that's really nitpicky, but I just think for a game of such scope and budget, it's kind of a thing that would have really lended itself well to more immersion. It might not make any difference whatsoever when I pick it up and play it, but it's just something that I noticed, and then I was like, I kind of wish it had that.
It's interesting because when you mentioned it, look, I hadn't noticed that, but then as soon as you mentioned it, I instantly picked up
Sorry
on it,
for
and
ruining it for you.
I kind of couldn't stop noticing it, because it is an interesting point, because I see, yeah, there's kind of no sort of environmental, no, I guess it's the environment isn't sort of dynamic in a way. I mean, even
Yeah.
in the trailer, it didn't kind of show any sort of weather systems, which I think they have spoken about, but I do think
Yeah.
that's kind of post launch, where it's kind of,
Yeah.
it is going to have dynamic different weather, while at this it's kind of just a bright sunny day throughout, apart from obviously when they're indoors. They have tried a little bit though, because this is the first Halo game that's featured like wildlife, which I know is
Yeah.
obviously a
Yeah.
fairly minor point, but I guess they've done that to try and add to that sense of,
Mm.
that the world is a living, breathing place. But yeah, like I say, I couldn't really not. I couldn't unsee when you said that, which I hadn't really picked up.
Yeah, and I think the only other like the only reason I kind of harp on about that point, and I really should forget this demonstration at this point, but when they did the initial slip space engine reveal and they had that quote unquote in engine footage, it was displaying a world that was really alive, really granular, vast, and kind of all of the things you think a Halo actually would be if one existed. And obviously that's not translated into, and I mean, we haven't played it, so I don't know for sure, but just on the stuff we've seen, that hasn't translated, which is fine. It's not necessarily an issue. But it's just something that once once you notice it, then you can't unnotice it again. But apart from those really small things, I thought it was a really good showing and massive improvement from before. So I'm certainly much more optimistic about it going into it now than I was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
just one
absolutely.
final thing before Flat will go to probably you and Pucks. I just want to ask Luke a quick question, just because you mentioned earlier about 343's campaigns. Where do you land on 4 out of interest, Luke? Because I often
Yeah.
I think maybe kind of the way that 343's games today have been looked at is, I think 4's campaigns is often kind of looked at quite fondly, and I see a lot of people of the impression that it's rather underrated, and then 4's multiplayer was a bit crap, but then 5 was basically the opposite, where the campaign was crap but the multiplayer was excellent. But I think there's maybe enough in 4 that gives me hope. Obviously 5, the more recent one, was unfortunately a massive letdown, so I can totally understand anybody's apprehension from that perspective. But yeah, I'm just curious where you landed on 4.
No, yeah, I agree. I follow the same sentiment as everybody else, I think, on that. In that 4 campaign was really good. Actually, I don't think it was as good as 1 to 3 as a campaign, but it was a really good first effort, as it was from 343. Just making their first game after Bungie, and I really enjoyed it. It was also really stunning at the time. I remember it.
Yeah.
It's really
It
impressive.
still holds up today. If you play that on a Series X now, it looks really
great,
damn good.
It looks, it does. And then so yeah, I think you're right. That kind of gives me some hope that at least for free, do know how to make a good campaign. And I say good as a relative term, because I think 5 was dreadful. Like absolutely dreadful. But I think the reason 5 really failed for me is because, 2 reasons. One is that Halo's about Master Chief, and it should just be about Master Chief. You can have allies and all of that other stuff, and you can have, as they did like in 2, where you play as the Arbiter, you can have all that sort of stuff. That's fine, but at its core, if the majority of the game you're not playing as Master Chief, that's a real issue. Like that's a real problem.
Yeah.
And I think the second one was that I think the creative director for 5 was the same guy who was the director of Star Wars Republic Commando. And if you play Republic Commando, it's basically Halo 5, except I don't know if it had co-op back in the day. And I really hated 5 for the fact that, everything was kind of designed around that, the kind of co-op element, or it was kind of jump in, jump out sort of thing. that's just, to me, that's not a great Halo campaign at all, because I'm just not interested. Like, the multiplayer in the campaign should be really distinct for me in Halo. And it's not that, obviously, like the older Halos you could play co-op all the time, right? But it never felt like it was integral to the story or integral to the game that you played in co-op. It's just a nice extra. Whereas 5 it did. So five it felt like, this was designed around having 4 people at all times, which I really disliked. So yeah, I think sentiment-wise, yeah, completely agree. And so but I think the thing is, 5 left such a sour taste in my mouth. I can't actually remember how good 4 was. If you get what I mean, like, I can't drag up the memories of the goodness of 4 because it was good, and kind of have that give me some optimism. But everything they've showed so far, particularly in this trailer, suggests that they know exactly where they went wrong in 5. And they're trying to get back to that classic Halo, just in a modern context. So that's great.
Yeah, there's been lots of narrative about, this is kind of feeling like it's kind of going back to its roots to some degree, which is kind of cool for the Halo fans out there, particularly of the earlier Halos in the series. Pucks, what did you make of the trailer? Was you kind of pleased with the graphical improvements that you'd seen? Because obviously, first time round, these it got a lot of stick, and I have to say, first time round, I actually really enjoyed the look of the gunplay. And then having played the multiplayer, and I appreciate multiplayer and campaign are different in lots of regards, particularly when gunplay to a certain degree. But was you impressed with what you saw?
Yeah, I was 100%. I think, as the other guys have said, graphically things are really good. But what I didn't appreciate immediately, though, I think after I'd watched the 6-minute or so trailer, whatever it was. Obviously, I had a look on Twitter and stuff, and people were talking about it. But then a bit later that afternoon or evening, whenever it was, I saw that there was a number of Twitter posts from, I don't know, people on the Twitter sphere that were sharing comparisons between the last year's reveal and this one. I think what a lot of people may have not realised is that a lot of the clips that they'd shown in this reveal trailer were almost exactly the same as they were in the original. So a lot of the time you could do a side-by-side comparison.
Yeah.
And I think there's a particular moment when Master Chief is in one of the ships that's in the stars somewhere, and the camera's kind of panning backwards, looking at his back. Yeah. And I think from the real last year, this is from the perspective of seeing them side by side, like the two images. Like the last year's one almost had like a cartoony-ish feel to it, whereas this
cleaner,
one
wasn't it?
Yeah, you could, like, this time round. I think Scott may have said it, if not today. I know it's definitely been said in the previous show that you can see that he's battle hardened. The armor's worn. It's got the scratches. It's got the dents. It's darker in color. The tones are, and the light. Maybe it could just be like a difference or changing lighting. But I suppose in a way that just goes to show how important things like lighting are in a game, and how they can just completely change the look and feel of an environment without actually really changing anything else.
It was the same for the gun models as well. The gun models look like they've been used a lot more as well. The level of detail on those is pretty good. And they've obviously spent a lot of time and effort on the textures of that. And I can't remember what game dev it was now. I was watching this YouTube video quite a long time ago, and they were saying that the thing that actually brought the game alive was actually making it sort of putting dents and scratches on stuff, because it just makes it look so much more realistic. And they've certainly done that with this game.
Oh, definitely. And I really liked that also, that I think, as the guys already have said, that they really showed a lot of grapple hook gameplay as well.
Yeah.
And kind of really utilising that. It's funny, because as Scott was saying about, as Luke was saying about, it's unfortunate there's not really much stealth elements. In my head, I'm laughing, because each time we're talking about stealth, it's just, what the video that's playing is just grapple hooks and rocket launchers and explosions and like shit going everywhere, and it's just like the game isn't made for stealth. And I think the one other little thing I found just amusing in general, and I think because it's the kind of thing you see in multiplayer, and I thought in the story campaign they may make it look a bit better, but that the image where the chief goes up to a panel and then it's really cool, like holographic UI that you could select a vehicle to have dropped in. And it drops in like one of the, I don't know, some sort of hovercraft or whatever it's called. And I think rather than when it's dropped from the bigger ship that brings it in, I just find it funny how it doesn't just kind of like nicely float down like it's an expensive bit of kit. It just completely smashes on the ground and there's bits everywhere. It's just
Yeah.
So I thought it was a little funny detail to add, but
That's kind of like a Halo thing.
Yeah, I
where
get it,
things
yeah.
kind of just
Physics,
drop.
yeah.
Even going back to the original Halo when they had like warthogs and scorpions being dropped off by pelicans and things like that. That's kind of always been part of it. But it is funny because like obviously it's it's not real, but like if you imagine a world where these things existed, these things would cost like so much money, and just like drop it and it just like smashes off the floor.
like wings first as well. It's just like destroyed. But
Yeah, it's also it easy could have just floated down as well, considering it is something that flies. But I think it's kind of something that is just a little bit. It is very Halo, that sort of thing. Those are just little things that remind me of playing the original Halo, where kind of like the dropship comes in and just kind of plonks a vehicle down in front of you, and then you just off you go. Which is really cool. It does just it reminds me so much of how I remember Halo CE being, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And that's a really, I mean, that must be such a tough nut to crack to get that feel. In the sixth game like that, it's I'm really pleased with what I saw, to be honest, and I'm quite pleased that they directly addressed the whole Craig thing as well, because they flashed up some images, didn't they, of the old Craig and the new Craig. So it's pretty good that pretty cool that they acknowledge that side of things. Pucks, we've got quite a lot of chat. Let's work our way through the chat if we can.
Yeah, sure thing. Comment here at the top. Bullman Gamer, who says, personally, I think they could have improved Master Chief's facial animations.
I actually wonder what he's doing under that.
Yeah. There was a few back and forth between Bullman Gamer and Wandering Dutch, because Bullman Gamer originally said, watching that video at the end, it didn't show Xbox One, only Series X and S. Does this mean they're dropping Xbox One? But then Wandering Dutch did reply to that saying, nope, it's still coming to Xbox One. They are just doing the lead up to Christmas marketing to push hardware sales as well.
Yeah, it did just say console, cloud, and PC as well, and obviously Xbox One falls in the console category. I think it specifically had the Series X and S logo in there, which obviously if they want you to play the game on a Series X S, if you're going to play, they don't necessarily want you playing the Xbox One version. I suspect so.
Comment here from Indie Gamer, who says, the term outpost was a little concerning. I think this was regarding I think it was Scott or Luke talking when he was talking about outposts and the open worldy feel, and how a lot of games seem to use the term outpost and the land being barren outside of that.
Yeah, when I heard outpost, the first thing I thought was Far Cry. It's like, oh, please, no.
Yeah.
But Halo has had outposts in the
has.
past. Not sort of. I think the difference is here. They kind of there's objectives assigned to them. But again, kind of going back to the original Halo CE, you're exploring the original ring, and you'll just drive and you'll come across an outpost. So it's not that new to the series. I have seen a lot of people making the Far Cry comparisons, which I don't think are fair nor right. Because it's not like those sorts of things are brand new to Halo. The only thing that's new here is kind of there's almost an objective around them, but they've always been there. They've always existed in these Halo worlds. So I personally don't have any issues, despite how much I don't like Far Cry.
Yeah, I think the issue is that, or at least from my perspective, is that I get Ubisoft PTSD when I hear Outpost, because I think of
we need a new word for it.
Yeah, I don't know what they are, but I think of a map. You're opening a map and it's just littered with absolute shit everywhere, and there's tons of them. And I don't think I'm quite comfortable with the idea of an outpost. As you say, Scott, like Halo has had these before, not to this scale, but it has had that sort of thing. And I don't have fundamentally an issue with them. It's how you use them in your game. And Ubisoft just go, well, here you go, here's 7,000 activities, go and do them. I think here, at least from the TAC map stuff that they showed, it's a lot more, kind of sparse, which is a better thing, having them mean something and connect to the world in a more fundamental way. And I think, I don't think this will be a game listed of Far Cry-esque things to do. I think they'll kind of because the best worlds, like I think it's some of the best kind of hub worlds ever made, and the great things about them were that they were sparse, that they were memorable because of the restraint that the dev showed in how they constructed the world. Like I think of stuff like Shadow of the Colossus, right, which is probably one of the best games ever made, and that has quite a vast world, but there's not a great deal in it to do. But everything that you do in the game is fantastic and memorable, and I think that's the kind of thing I hope that this game will try and do. I'm sure there will be busy work because there's upgrades to be had, but if they can just get the balance right between like having enough to do that you feel engaged all the time, but also having that stuff be memorable, then it'll be a fantastic game just because of that. So that's what I hope they do. Whether they will do or not, I don't know. But certainly, I'm not getting Far Cry vibes from it, which it's or
No.
Ubisoft World vibes in general. I'm not getting that.
God
from
for
it.
that. No, exactly. Yeah, no, that's good. Pux, where did we get to up in the chat?
Yeah, where was I? I got one here from Stubbs Gaming who says, I hope Xbox is ready when Xbox doesn't get a bump in subs, as everyone will opt to play the free-to-play version instead. Which I thought was interesting, because I suppose, our games like Call of Duty Warzone are a good example of, a free-to-play title that most people jump onto, and that actually not many people will buy the actual one, assuming, obviously, you're not on Game Pass.
Well, I was going to
what do you guys
say,
think of that?
it's on Game Pass, but B, they're going to heavily monetize it anyway. I mean, free-to-play stuff still generates lots of cash, doesn't it? As we know with, all kinds of free-to-play games. So I'm sure Microsoft are going to be utilizing the in-game transactions very strongly.
But do you reckon the game will suffer from Game Pass subscriptions for those that they're trying to convince to get onto it because of the fact it's free to play?
I don't think so. I don't think
I
so.
think there is an element. I think there's an element. I think obviously a lot of people come to Halo for the multiplayer. So if the multiplayer doesn't cost, then people aren't necessarily going to subscribe to Game Pass or buy the campaign side of Halo Infinite. So I think it will have an impact on the overall sales of the game. Do I think Xbox is worried about that? No, of course not, because they made it free to play for a reason, because they want the multiplayer to have as big a reach as possible. And I think we're going to see really, really good numbers on PC in particular when the game's out. I think it'll probably be a massive hit on Steam if you look at the success that Microsoft have had with Forza, Sea of Thieves, and Halo Master Chief Collection on Steam. Yeah, so I understand what Stubbs is saying. I think, yeah, he's probably right. Game Pass subscribers and game sales are going to be lower than it would be if the multiplayer was part of the game and not its own free-to-play component. But obviously Microsoft made that decision for a reason, and I don't think they'll be necessarily concerned. You've also got to consider, just before that, you got Forza Horizon 5, which is only available in Game Pass just a few short weeks before, which I imagine will have an impact. But also I do think Halo campaign being in there will have an impact as well, especially if they ramp up the marketing, which it seems like they're likely to do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously per unit costs, like you say, if they were to bundle it part of a paid for package, part of the campaign and stuff. But like you say, they are going to heavily monetize that within the game, so they might not, they're not necessarily going to be down financially on the deal, are they?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. The free to play element only has sort of a financial upside for Microsoft, really, doesn't it? It's going to get access to so many more players because of that. The battle pass system that they've included is likely to be popular as well, especially considering sort of how it differs to other battle passes. So I don't think they'll be concerned with the impact that it has on Game Pass subscribers or the overall game sales. They'll be purely looking at engagement when it comes to Halo Infinite. I suspect that'll be the key metric, not the number of games it's sold. The multiplayer is the live service element, so that's where the money's going to be. At least I suspect. It will be interesting to see how they monetize the campaign side of things going forward, though. Obviously, they've spoken about the 10-year plan. that applies to the campaign side of things as well. And they've kind of spoken about Halo Infinite being kind of more of a platform similar to Master Chief Collection. So it'll be interesting to see how that expands over the years. I hope and I expect them to introduce new and different stories. And it'll be interesting to see is that going to be paid DLC? Is that just going to be part of the base game? And whether that has sort of an impact on game sales and Game Pass subscribers. But yeah, I doubt they're worried.
No, exactly.
So I've actually got some comments regarding this as well.
Yeah,
Chaos Enti's put a comment in saying that they're not in it for the immediate sales. They want engagement, and Game Pass gets exclusive multiplayer content.
Yeah, really good point.
Yep, and another comment in the chat from Otis Harris Jr., who says Xbox Game Pass will offer perks for Halo for Ultimate Game Pass subs. So kind of the same comment, really. And as well as what you said, Scott. So yeah, I suppose it does make sense. Yeah, in the long term, if they've got this massive roadmap, then yeah, as you say, as KSNT said as well, yeah, they're not in it for the immediate sales, but more the long term gain, I guess, rather than the short term.
Yeah, if Microsoft could monetize any of their franchises, Halo was the one that was probably going to potentially generate the most cash, particularly as the multiplayer is so well loved and free to play games are so popular at the moment. And to be honest, free to play games are pretty cool, but they do come and go. So I hope. Come and go in popularity, as it were. Warzone, is it going to stay as popular as it currently is? Probably not. It's going to fade at some point, and they have to constantly renew and reinvent these. And it's going to be interesting to see how Microsoft play this and how they're going to keep reinventing and kind of keep it fresh in everyone's mind if it's free to play. Because the
well, Wondering Dutch is just Wondering Dutch just put a comment as well. Sorry, go on.
Cool. Go on.
Wondering Dutch says, Game Pass Ultimate subs get bonus content, and you know how kids are with wanting more. They spend fortunes on Fortnite coins and Robux, etc., for Roblox and whatever. So yeah, it kind of goes in hand with what you were just saying there, I think.
Yeah, I guess so. But like I say, one of the troubles with free to play is it's easy to put down as well, because you've not really invested or committed much initial outlay. I'm guessing if you've spent quite a lot of money in season passes and stuff like that, or battle passes, that keeps you going. But it's going to be interesting to see how they keep it fresh. But no, fantastic. Well, thank you very much. Again, that topic was bigger than I probably anticipated. And to be honest, anything Halo related normally is, in all fairness, so not a huge surprise there. But no, thank you very much. And chat, thank you very much for getting involved in that. It's really cool. And to be honest, it kind of brings us on to the third topic. Kind of, are we in the golden age of gaming? We'll come to you first, Pux, if that's all right. I very rarely come to you first on a topic, but things are pretty good at this moment in time. And I know, obviously, PC doesn't really exist in generations. Perhaps you could think of GPUs as existing in generations and stuff, but not quite a lot consoles do. And things at the moment are pretty good across the board on all sides of gaming. And gaming is going to evolve, over the coming years. The platform or the medium will change. Whether streaming becomes the mainstream way that we game going forwards, many years into the future. I don't know if anyone's actually had a chance of trying out the new cloud gaming on the Xbox console itself. I was playing a little bit of Control earlier via the xCloud on my Series X. And it kind of worked. The one thing that really impressed me was the lack of lag, I guess. The controls were pretty good, but the one thing that really did suffer was the quality, obviously the image, and more than anything, the colours. But these are still new technologies that have got a long way to go and progress. And Pux, I don't think gaming's ever been as good as it is at this moment in time. Do you just think we're on an exponential sort of curve upwards and gaming's just going to get better and better, or do you think it's going to peak at some point as innovations kind of slow up?
Are you talking from a hardware or a software perspective?
Kind of both, really, to be honest, because, that's a good point. There's been obviously lots of innovations in hardware, but also software with things like streaming services and free to play, those sort of money-making sort of schemes and exercises like that. They're still relatively in their infancy, I guess, and there's probably still some way to go. But, is there much innovation left in the gaming scene?
From a hardware perspective, I think, the real push now, especially when you consider the kind of things that Unreal Engine 5 is going to offer when that goes, version 1 early next year, it's it all seems to be moving away from how can we make things better graphically, because to an extent we're kind of really reaching a lot of photorealism already. So how much more real can you make photorealistic? So a lot of things in terms of innovations now seem to be on how do you optimize and make workflows easier. Seems to be the way that's kind of going. I mean, I think if you remember the original Unreal Engine 5 like full reveal, they talked about they got their new nanite lighting system, and they've also got their, I can't remember the name of it now, but their new system where you can have like movie or film quality assets, which we're talking like millions of triangles and polygons and models, and rather than having to work with LODs, which is a level of detail, so things are lower detailed the further away they are from the camera and stuff. You can just have it as it is, straight in, plonked into the game, and you're guaranteed 60 frames and that kind of stuff. I think for the long-term future in hardware, on the hardware side of things, that is going to be where the innovations will come from. And from that means I'd like to, at least how I see it currently, it's going to take a lot of strain off of the current game development workflows and actually make things a lot quicker and easier, because you're not having to constantly go back through this optimization loop. I suppose the only downside, it's not really a downside, but the only con of that is that you're technically then barricade, or that you put in a barrier between what can then run on older hardware, but then that's always going to be the case anyway as innovation improves. So from a hardware perspective, I think that's kind of the way it's going to go, at least for the next, say, 10 years, before the next big thing some clever person makes up. Maybe like VR, maybe, I think a load of like shows and stuff have done it where you become an avatar in a game, for example. That, if stuff like that happens in, say, 50 years' time, then that's going to be really exciting. But I think from a software side, though, I have a bit of a different take on this, and I think I don't really have a definitive answer whether I do or don't think it's the golden age. And in a way, I kind of think it depends on when you were born and how old you were when you got introduced to gaming. Because I had an interesting conversation with my cousin as he was over around mine over the weekend. And we had a similar conversation, actually, but we was coming at it from, when we were kids, for example, which was during the early stage of the PlayStation 1 life cycle. This is when 3D was really new and really taking off, and a lot of developers, there was no real standard for how to make things in 3D, or what controls worked, whatever else. So there was all sorts of weird, wonderful, and wacky games which came out with both absolute shite and absolute classics now. And a lot of those older titles then set the standards for the kind of games that we have now. So I really appreciate and love that aspect, and I think that was great. And then going from that for things like the PlayStation 2, when things were slowly getting bigger, technology was getting better, and you could do more, but at the same time it was still fresh and new. So again, this is from my perspective, that there's a lot of games that so much weird and wonderful content came out at that period of time when it was all new. But now that we have things more established and there's kind of standards of what people do and don't like, what you should or shouldn't do, etc., a lot of you could argue if you was to put a lot of modern games under one umbrella, that they do follow the similar formulas. That yes, a lot of first-person shooters or first-person perspective games, they're different in their story and the elements that they do, but ultimately they tend to control relatively the same. They shoot the same. They feel the same. So. But then when you look at, if you're scrolling through, like, say, TikTok videos and stuff, a lot of people in there, well, as of right now, in their, mid-late teens, put a lot of content on there. And there's a lot of gaming ones I come across and I'm scrolling through mindlessly. And they have their good memories of when they were kids and how things like Mario Kart Wii were fantastic. And they were playing Call of Duty 4 online for the first time ever. And then that moves on to things like, I've got introduced to Warzone for the first time, or things like that. So... And and that was their golden age of gaming. So I don't know whether, from the software side, there's really... I don't think we're necessarily in the golden age now. From my perspective, the golden age was maybe mid-late 360 in a way. But that's just based on what I liked then and what where things are for me in my life now. So I suppose it's almost quite... I suppose in a way it's a philosophical answer rather than a concrete one. But
well, to be honest, really it was a philosophical question, to be honest, and I guess my point is, do we ever appreciate the gaming that we've got right now, or is it something that we always tend to appreciate more in retrospectively, as it were?
I suppose, yeah, I think that is true in a way, and I think that's kind of where I'm trying to get at. But I've just quickly glanced at the chat actually, and I've just kind of found one out of nowhere. My eyes kind of went to the indie gamer who said about definitely the golden age for me now. Amazing time for games right now, which is very true. And I suppose, I mean, looking at the tag indie gamer from the indie game scene, I think actually we are in the golden age now because in the indie games perspective, because going back to early mid 2000s, there wasn't really many tools for people in the masses to create their own games and market them. You had to be not only a bedroom coder, but you had to be, well, especially if you're considering as late as say PS1 stuff, to follow a stereotype, you had to be like the uber computer nerd, didn't you? That also had the money to be able to afford the dev kits and stuff. Whereas nowadays, all of a lot of the the most popular game engines, Unity, Unreal Engine, and whatever else, all are free to use, free to download now, free to publish for the most part. A lot of art tools are free, or there's free to use alternatives. You've got games where one person can, even a lot of like Blender, for example, is a great 3D modeling program for things like that. So if you're making an indie game now, it's been no better time than ever for that, and especially with things like Unreal Engine, which are now enabling all of their tools for free, and you haven't even got to pay them anything until after you make $1 million worth. So there's a lot of advantages now which you didn't have in indie scene even say 5 or 6 years ago. But from a AAA perspective, I think that's the more, as I say earlier, like philosophical one, where I think it kind of depends on when you were born, what you grew up with, and how things have changed in your life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. And to be honest, like I say, there is no right answer. And perhaps we'll come to you next, Scott. When do you think your golden age of gaming is? And do you think it's right now? Because I think Indy put in one of the comments, when you look back with rose-tinted spectacles, things always seemed a lot better in the past. And sometimes when you boot up that game that you absolutely loved, by today's standards, it is obviously a bit crappy and not quite as you remember. So is there an argument to be said that, you never actually appreciate the era of gaming that you're currently in and always kind of look back retrospectively more fondly?
Yeah, it is such an interesting topic because as Luke, sorry, Pox and some of the chat have alluded to already, nostalgia plays a really, really big part in it, and not only that, but as has already been said, sort of the time in your life that you happen to come across a certain period of games, often it links back to your childhood, when kind of you had no worries in the world, you were just playing these games for fun. But I think there's another element too, which is kind of now that I'm getting older, and I'm in a fortunate position where I can just go and buy any game that I want at this moment in time. Kind of I look at it so much more fondly now because I get to play pretty much anything that I would like to play. Obviously, there's limits. I'm not going out and buying every single game, but if there's a game out there, I'm not having to beg parents for it, save up pocket money or anything like that. I can get it. And the point that Pucks makes about indie games and indie in the chat has also mentioned it. So much creativity is coming from that space now that we historically haven't had. That I'd say it's almost something that I think kind of when you look back in it, in a way, I think, and please tell me if you think this is a stupid thing to say, almost every year kind of, or not necessarily every year, but kind of every generation, things kind of get better in some respects, but I don't think we'll truly appreciate it until for maybe 10 or 20 years. I certainly think the next couple of years are going to be very much a golden era for gaming. I think if you look at just the quality of titles that are likely to come out over the next couple of years, I think we're going to be looking back on 2022 and 2023 as in terms of the overall quality of game releases as some of the best in the history of games, in my opinion. I think it's looking that bright. And K Santa made a really, really good point as well, where he mentions he went back and played one of his favorite games, and which was on PlayStation 1. He says there was a lot of rose-colored glasses going on there, which I think is fair because games have advanced so much, even in just a short period of time. You go back and play games from the PlayStation 1 era. You go back and maybe play games on the Dreamcast, and often what you find is that they're just not how you remember them. Kind of your memory of them is your memory of them at the time, not necessarily how the game was, if that makes sense, or how it made you feel at the time.
Which you know what? I think that's the key thing. It's how you made it, how it made you feel at the time. And to be honest, sometimes it's
Yes.
the game itself, but sometimes it's stuff that's going on externally in your life as well. And sometimes a game comes along that you just absolutely need, if that makes any sense. Either it's
Yeah.
an open world escapism or something challenging. It is sometimes the planets align and you get into a real zone with a particular game. Sometimes I think it is how
Yeah.
it makes you feel, isn't it?
Yeah, and not to bring it back to Halo again too much, Flag, but kind of one of the points I was maybe trying to make when we were talking about Halo Infinite before is Halo Infinite kind of reminds me of what I remember feeling when playing Halo
Hmm.
CE. If that makes sense, if I go back
Yeah.
and play Halo CE now, which I absolutely do from time to time, I played it just this week. I jumped into to one of the levels. Obviously, I still look back and on that game so fondly, but it's bloody old now. You know, it's 20 years old. It's aged. So if I play it now, I'm not enjoying it now the same way that I did when I first was exploring that ring on Halo. It didn't make me feel the same way now as it did back then. And one of the things that excites me about Halo is it's it's making me feel the same way if that makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, it's one of those things that I think, you know, almost every generation you could make an argument that's the golden age because things um go I guess move so quickly. I guess in almost any industry, you know, things move quickly with time. And you know, we've seen innovations in VR, AR,
Hmm.
motion controls, you know, even just little things like the enhancements PlayStation have made with the control.
Yeah.
All these things are just adding to the experience where I think if you were you just they're almost incomparable in some respects, and I think the quality is just elevated so much more now than it was maybe 20 years ago. That yeah, I think it's just kind of these next couple of years are going to be the golden era, but then in 5 years' time we'll probably be saying right, the next couple of years are going to be the golden era because I think things are just going to continue to develop.
Yeah, exactly. No, I completely agree. To be honest, but zooming forwards as a medium, can it continually to or exponentially continue to just get better and better and better all of the time, or will there be a point where, like Pucks was saying, we've kind of hit photorealism. All games are running at 240 something frames a second, and we've got all of the motion controls and stuff. Do you know what I mean? I know that seems a bit of a sort of, well, not an exaggeration, but overblowing it a little bit. But lots of games seem to be striving for more and more realistic lighting. But once we're there, does the medium then start tailing off at that point? Because is this a medium where you can just indefinitely innovate continually, and if not, does there become a point where it slows up and we look at that point we look back and think, well, actually, X, Y, and Z was the golden age of gaming, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It is interesting, and like you say, Flav, it is very much sort of a philosophical question almost, and
Yeah.
it's kind of everybody's position is going to be different depending on what mindset you're in, what age you are, what games you played, when you got into the game, because two people who were 30 could have gotten into games at completely different times.
Yeah.
Even what genre of games that you're into, if you're somebody who prefers 2D platformers, or if you're someone who prefers first person shooters, your perspective is gonna be different.
I find it ironic, like you say, and I do agree that there is a push towards sort of photorealistic graphics and stuff, particularly with things like ray tracing and stuff like that. Lighting obviously makes a huge difference. But obviously, when you are back in the indie scene, then we're going back to sort of pixel art and back to the 8-bit days and stuff like that, which is kind of cool to see. Luke, when do you consider your golden age of gaming? Do you think it's now, or is it at some time in your past, do you think?
I think it's now. Actually, I mean, now being relative, as in the last,
Yeah.
last gen to present day, I would say is my kind of golden age. I think there's different. I mean, it's difficult because there's different ways of looking at this, right? I think if you're looking at it from a purely technological perspective, then the present day is always the current golden age. It's just the most advanced we've become. It won't be forever because there will always be advancements, and I think we're still games visually are outstanding now, and some of them in particular are just incredible. But if you look at the kind of techniques that we really need to use to make them actually photorealistic, and even more advanced, stuff like ray tracing, in particular, we're still ways off from that being commonplace in games and being able to run to high levels. So we're just getting started on that technology essentially. So and that is seen as basically the future of real time rendering, and we're not anywhere near being able to do that on the scale that's required yet. So I think in terms of creativity and software, I think it's really, I genuinely think it's very hard to argue that the last 5-6 years in the present day haven't been the golden age, because you can point to many eras of gaming, PS2 and Xbox era in particular, and say, look at all these incredible titles that came out then. But there were some amazing genre-defining games that came out at that point. But I think the difference between now and then is the consistency of the quality of games has never been as high as it has been in the last 5 or 6 years. A lot of that is actually attributable to indie games, because the indie game scene has had a massive boom, and delivered some of the best experiences that gaming's ever produced, and it continues to do that. And then in tandem with that, you have kind of free major platform holders that are really trying to push each other and put out fantastic games in the AAA space and AA space. And I think back, the last 5, 6, 7 years about some of the games that have released, and many of the games that are released, and I just kind of look back with a smile on my face, because it's just been incredible. Particularly if you own multiple platforms, I think that anyone who owns multiple platforms has really benefited from the last 5, 6, 7 years, because there's so many incredible experiences everywhere all the time, and then that's combined with these incredible services that are coming along. Game Pass has been one. Just innovations in the PC space, software and hardware side. Nintendo continuing to pump out incredible Zelda and Mario games. Xbox making a resurgence. Sony just continuing to make incredible single player games. And then obviously the indie scene, which has been amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing. And yeah, I think we're living in the golden age. I agree that the gold, it's really hard to define when that period is. And I think if you look at even just a year from now, and you look at the releases that are coming next year, I mean, if all of those, or even 80% of those, live up to the potential that they have, then it's hard to argue against that in terms of the quality of software, that we haven't had an age, golden age of gaming. Because I mean, there's some just next year, there's some unbelievably big games coming out. So yeah, I mean, it is a difficult question, and I think everybody's going to have a different answer to it, which I think has been mentioned. But yeah, when I look back on it, I think it's last 5, 6, 7 years have been probably the best gaming's ever been, and probably better than any other era, for every reason, no matter what reason. So I hope it continues. I'm sure it will.
No, absolutely. And to be honest, that was kind of the inspiration behind the question, because like you say, there is lots of nostalgia out there, and rightly so. But I completely agree that, with the year that's coming up, and the current gen or now gen consoles that we've got, particularly in hardware performance, when they're compared to perhaps sort of mid and top end PCs and stuff, it's such a fantastic market out there in terms of hardware. I completely agree. I think we're still a couple of generations off ray tracing being kind of the standard, and to being a fantastic level with the frame rates to go with it and stuff. And obviously, historically, if you're gaming in this day and age and have been for a number of years, if not decades, then, you've obviously got all of that nostalgia and history to call upon as well. But yeah, no, I completely agree. Right now, for me personally, is the golden age of gaming. And I'm just so grateful that I can see it for what it is, because like I say, when you've got so many fantastic innovations, like say even in services, things like Game Pass, PlayStation Now, all of those kind of things, it's just so nice that this medium continues to progress like it does. Perhaps unlike the film industry, there was a limit of what they could do. They had to dabble in 3D, obviously the audio.
Remember when 3D games were a thing
exactly.
once upon a time as well. That was
No,
short-lived, wasn't it?
But so in cinema they've had audio they can innovate on. They've had sort of Technicolor, widescreen, things like IMAX and stuff. But there's obviously not as much scope there that they can do as you can with games. And like you say, augmented reality, virtual reality are things that could be gimmicks. They could be here to stay. Who knows? But it's such a fantastic time to be a gamer, to be honest. And like you say, being at this moment in time, with the year that we've got coming, and the the years beyond that, it's fantastic. Luke, do you mind going through some of the comments? We've had some comments come in on this one. Are you right going through those?
I'm if I can find them. Yeah. Yeah. No. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, no. So on this one, Pyromat said the golden age of gaming was the late 90s. I'm using comics as my way of judging it. Modern comics are far better in looks, but than comics back in the golden age, for example.
Yeah.
Let's have a look. There's quite a few here. Yeah, indie gamer saying definitely the golden age for me. Amazing time for games right now. Obviously, from an indie perspective, I think we're
absolutely from an indie perspective.
Yeah, that I don't think there's any disputing that at all.
I think just on that point, sorry, I think one of the reasons that indie games have really helped push the medium forward is, I think, because although I agree with sort of anyone that says so, we're in the I guess golden era right now is AAA development. I think in a lot of cases, not to sort of bash on Ubisoft, but they're kind of a prime example where we kind of look at what they're doing, and I think AAA game development has become such a risky business because it's become so expensive that I think maybe creativity in the AAA space in some respects has maybe been stifled somewhat. But what we've seen is the creativity from the indie scene just absolutely explode.
So let me pitch this to you, and it's a very specific question, but would you say perhaps the golden age of Ubisoft is behind them?
Did Ubisoft ever have a golden age?
I think Ubisoft did have a golden age.
I'm being harsh there. They did. It was original Splinter Cell on the Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow
Assassin's Creed.
On the Xbox was.
First Assassin's Creed was garbage.
So yeah, I think that's fair, Flap. But I think the reason for that is the problem is you look at Ubisoft. This could go on for ages, but obviously they've found a model that or they've tried to sort of recreate a model that works purely financially across all of their franchises, which has led to their games feeling very similar. But that is because these games are so bloody expensive to make that they need to make sure that they recoup their money, and that's why I'm saying kind of indie game development has seen that creativity just explode, and that's kind of made up for maybe some creativity lacking in the AAA space. I'm not saying there isn't any; there absolutely is creativity in the AAA space. Absolutely, there's lots of it, but I certainly think we've seen the indie scene make up for, and then some that maybe I guess risk aversion in the AAA space as well.
Yeah,
no, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think as well that another reason why we're in the golden age of gaming, in my opinion, is that the ability of and someone mentioned it previously, but the ability of people just to get access to game engines and build games is easier than it's ever been. And the state of the industry at the moment, in any case, in terms of the scope and scale and how successful even small games can be, means that you can launch an indie game, and even if it's super niche, often you can make profit on it, which is quite incredible because there are that many people out there that love games, and the captive audience is so large now. And so a lot of these games can become successful, and they can become successful even though they are very, quote unquote risky creatively, compared to AAA contemporaries or anything like that. So I mean, for Ubisoft, they did have a golden age of gaming, but as Scott said, they came up with this formula, which is shit, but they came up with it, and it's been very successful for them, and it still is. Probably plateau somewhat soon if it hasn't already, but but stuff like that just serves to exemplify how other developers / publishers have been very successful and creative by comparison. So it's really interesting.
And to be honest, Ubisoft on their own, you could probably throw similar at Activision, EA, some of the other big publishers out there as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean that's all been, that's one of the negatives I think of this era is the emergence of the service game. I think that kind of stifles creativity to a greater or lesser extent in games, and that's an unfortunate byproduct of how big games are becoming in terms of their development costs and the time it takes to make them. But I think the good thing is we've got so many active participants in the market making games that you can ignore those very easily and just be like, look at all these amazing games over here. So it doesn't really matter. And for those people who do like those service games, there's an incredible choice there as well, and a lot of them are free. They have no gateway, no gate to entry. So it's interesting, but Ubisoft can fuck off, to be honest. So,
yeah, and I think even EA, and I know EA have had a bit of a bad rap. I think they deserve at least some credit for the work that they've done. Working with smaller developers in particular.
It Takes Two. I thought it was a fantastic game.
It Takes Two, Lost in Random, both games that come out just this year that are from smaller development teams that they've put their resources behind. Obviously, they've still got their FIFAs and Maddens, and
that's the trouble, isn't it? The EA Sports all gets lumped in with it, doesn't it? That's the trouble, I guess.
Yeah, but they've at least shown an appetite to sort of branch out into and support these smaller developers, which I think deserves to be applauded. And you mentioned Activision, that's absolutely right. You look at what they're doing, and they're just consolidating everything into one big card machine. EA are at least trying to diversify in some respects. So I think now, while obviously even just a couple of years ago, it was very easy to sort of hit on EA. I think they've certainly stepped up above, the likes of Ubisoft and Activision now, certainly.
Yeah, and I mean, like EA just into, as you say, trying to diversify. Dead Space remake, Jedi Fallen Order. They're recognizing that there's room out there for also great big budget single player experiences, rather and the not just EA Sports and all that sort of stuff, which is good. So hopefully that continues, and hopefully Ubisoft have that epiphany at some point as well, that not everything has to be the same.
No, that's cool. Any other comments we need to address while we're here, Luke?
Yeah, there's a few. So Indie Gamer again says it's easy to get nostalgic about back in the day, and it was awesome times, many eras like Dreamcast, N64. But you look back with rose-tinted glasses, never better than now for me, which is very true. Nostalgia is very influential when people talk about their favorite games. Wandering Dutch says the golden age of gaming will always be the future as we progress in both software technology and techniques and the methods of storytelling. He said we're always chasing that golden age, which I think is an interesting comment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I think that's very fair.
Yeah, and Kesante final one says it's the golden age of gaming for creativity. I think for the most part that's probably true, because even though you do have a lot of service crap and a lot of repeated ideas, you also have tons and tons of really creative, new, original, cool games. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Excellent. Well, fantastic. Thank you very much. Yeah, again, that topic could have probably gone on a bit longer. And like I say, it was a bit of a philosophical question, I guess, or topic, and make of it what you will. But it's an interesting one. And like I say, personally, now is a fantastic time to be a gamer in this particular medium. And it's, like you were saying, Luke, we can see where it's going to get better, particularly technically with things like ray tracing and stuff like that. That's not the be all and end all, because like you say, the vast majority of indie games don't have that. And as we've been saying, that's where the majority of the creativity has been coming from. But on the flip side of that, powerful hardware has probably never been easier to get hold of, and being able to create these indie games has never been easier to certain regards. So no, it's a fantastic time to be into this particular hobby. But we will draw that one to a close there, because we will be moving on to a fourth and final topic. But before we do, I'd just like to thank everyone in the chat so far that's been involved. Thank you for these. You've been putting some fantastic comments out there, and like I say, challenging us, challenging each other. That's what it's all about. I normally save this for the end of the show because I normally forget, but if you haven't liked, shared, and if you would like to subscribe, if you're new to the channel, welcome aboard. Very grateful for all three of those things. It helps the channel no end. It's free. And hopefully we can continue doing what we love doing. So let's move on to the fourth topic today, and this will be our confessionals, our Halloween special confessionals, and this is one where the chat, you absolutely need to get involved. And perhaps, Pucks, we will come to you first. And today's topic is around scary games, it being Halloween, and games that have scared the living shit out of us, to be honest. And it can be through the ages. It hasn't got to be modern games or anything like that. But Puxley, is there any specific games over the years that have actually scared the living daylights out of you?
Oh man, I think I've got a small number of particular standouts, and I think some of these involve you from when I was a child. I'm pretty sure.
Don't know if that's a good thing for you, Flap, though, to be honest.
Yeah, probably.
Well,
I'm laughing.
you'll find out.
I'm nervously laughing.
I think there was a time when this was back, years, about 20 odd years ago, when we went to visit or whatever it was, and my cousin and myself, you showed us both your PlayStation 1, I think almost for the first time, whenever it was, and I think it was two separate occasions, but I think you'd locked us in your bedroom with
Silent Hill.
Well, I didn't have a lock on the door, so that's not
not locked, but almost like trapped us in while we had like Silent Hill in the dark playing in the background of some sort of scary thing on a TV.
Hold on, I'm ringing the police. I'm a little bit.
Careful.
And I think similarly with Resident Evil 1 as well, I think there was a moment. And I think actually with that one, I remember, I think this was during the PS2 GameCube era, and I think GameCube at the time, I'd convinced my dad that I could go to Blockbuster to re-rent a game. I can't remember which one it was now, but I know in that moment my dad thought he would be, I don't know if it's cool is the right word, but tried to encourage me to try something new. And so he picked up a game called Resident Evil, and this was the remake to the PS1 version, not really knowing what it was. And then I wasn't too sure about it either, but I remember playing it for I must have been like, 8 or 9? And kind of starting to go through it a little bit, and the original cutscene, the remade kind of CGI cutscene with the the demon dogs and stuff, and then that wasn't a good start for me because I was quite a scaredy cat as a kid. And then kind of going in 2 rooms later, I think there's another CGI cutscene of a zombie that almost turns his head 180 degrees and then starts chasing you. And I think at that point it scared me to no end that I just jumped to the power button and put the game in the box until it had to be returned to Blockbuster 2 weeks later, wherever it was. That's how much I disliked it at the time. And but I had another weird one actually. And I think I mentioned this on a previous show that the original Medieval when I was a kid on the PlayStation 1 really freaked me out because I know in the original PlayStation magazines back then, I think when it was first coming out, the CGI the render image in the magazines was quite creepy looking. And I remember playing the demo on the demo disc of that magazine, and it had again this kind of really weird, horrible looking CGI trailer. And there's a scene when you see the main character for the first time, the skeleton guy. But there's lightning and there's horrible noise in the background as it zooms in on his face and a worm pops out his eye. And there's something about it that really freaked me out, and I just didn't like it for years. How'd
you feel about it now?
I when the PSP became a thing and I got one for Christmas, I actually got Medieval Resurrection, and I absolutely loved the game. And it transformed me after that, and I felt alive. But
okay.
Christ, what else was there? I think I had another moment with the original BioShock, actually. I think the moment when you first go into Rapture, and then there's a slicer that you kind of see in the dark for the first time. and he kind of jumps about a bit and he lunges at you a bit later on. That kind of got me going, and it was like for most of BioShock after that one, it was like almost on eggshells, and especially when you then come across a big daddy for the first time, and it's like, oh Christ,
Yeah, they start chasing you around. Yeah,
and then he starts chasing you,
stomping around.
Oh, that's a horrible feeling. And I think most recently, I really wanted to get into Resident Evil. This is before I did play it. I really wanted to play the Resident Evil 2 remake, but I heard about how the game you're basically constantly followed by some monster. So to ease myself into it, I actually ended up watching a whole playthrough on YouTube first, so I kind of knew what to expect, which I thought in a way might spoil it for me. But it's a completely different experience, even though I knew what was happening. When it's me playing as it, it's a completely different feeling. Like, it's still terrifying, but I just kind of know where to go rather than struggling with these horrible footsteps hit like in the background in the darkness or something. But I think those are some of my standouts over the years.
Luke, Scott, any games that have shit you up? To be honest, anything happened while you've been playing games like that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I personally don't think horror games are that good in a lot of cases. Or I don't think they do. I think movies have been a much better medium for scaring the shit out of me more so than games. I think older games as well. I don't think they really scared me the same way. And I think often a lot of that's just down to sort of the visual fidelity not offering sort of a level of realism almost that I think obviously movies were a little bit better at doing when I was a little bit younger. I think more recently though, I think two examples that stand out of games that I've genuinely almost shit myself on. First of all, Resident Evil 7.
Okay.
Particularly the early parts of that game. I think the problem that Resident Evil 7 has though is it kind of uses the same almost cheap trick a little too often in my opinion at the beginning, and it kind of like loses its impact. I think a lot of the early jump scares in the game really made me shoot myself at first, but then kind of you then expecting it, and then it kind of loses that sense. I think Dead by Daylight though is a really good game. It's kind of giving you that sense of I don't know. It's just like it gives you almost an anxiety about what's happening because of the atmosphere it's got, because of like the villains or whatever that they've got in the game. When you're desperately trying to sort of fix a generator and you can hear the heartbeat getting stronger, and then you kind of just see in the corner of your eye so on, and then he's chasing you. That game's kind of one of the scariest games I've played, I think, just because like the weight there's atmosphere in the game I think is really good. But I've never really been that big a fan of horror games though personally, so it's not really something that I have too much experience. I'm trying to even think if I've ever played a horror game when I was younger, to be honest.
There must have been games.
I'm trying to think.
Surely.
But I can't actually think of any sort of examples from when I was a kid. Maybe it was because I didn't have an uncle that locked us in a bedroom.
I was going to say, I suppose that might have something to do with it.
No, so yeah, I like to say I think horror is something that games, in my opinion, have struggled with a little bit, and I think often it kind of just resorts to like cheap jump scares in a lot of times, which I think loses its impact. But yeah, I think the sense of atmosphere in Dead by Daylight's kind of up there for me.
Interesting, Luke. Any games truly scared you? Are you into horror games and stuff? Is that your bag?
Yeah, so I'm actually a massive horror game and horror film fan. So
me too.
I really gravitate towards any horror games in particular. I have a real soft spot for them.
What one's done it for you? You know.
Oh, there's been loads.
Me the one.
I don't know. The one that I guess sticks out in my memory is really being too much where I had to put it down in breaks was probably Silent Hill 2.
Oh, okay.
That because I picked that up maybe when I was 14 or something like that. So, you know, I'm still a bit of a wimp at that point, I guess. Well, I still am, but more so then. And I think, you know, if I went back to it, in fact, the funny thing is, if I went back to Silent Hill now, I would still feel a bit uneasy playing it.
Really?
Because the thing so the best horror for me and the most intimidating horror is atmospheric horror, where nothing directly is happening on the screen that's kind of like, oh shit, there's a monster or anything like that. It's having a real kind of foreboding, dreadful atmosphere. Like there's something always around the corner, or something isn't right. I think the best horror is where reality is slightly warped, so it makes you feel very uneasy. Silent Hill 2 does that so well, just so well, where it's a combination of the music and the atmosphere, the fog, the way they use sounds in that game. So that was the one I always remember. That and Resident Evil 2, the original Resident Evil 2, were very good at that. I mean, Silent Hill was much better because Resident Evil 2, or Resident Evil in general, is very B-movie horror style stuff. So it uses kind of different techniques. But they were very good at that. In recent years, well, not so recent, there was a game on the 360 I'm sure people have heard of / played called Condemned. Which was kind of, I think it was a launch game actually. It was like 2005, and that again was that was really unsettling. There were kind of moments in that. There's always a moment I remember in that game where you go into a department store. It's first person. You go into a department store, and you're surrounded by mannequins. Like some of the mannequins will come to life basically, and it's just horrible. It's so dark all the time. It's really horrible. So there's that one got me a lot. Modern Resident Evils haven't really scared me that much. 7 did to some extent. I think in VR it's definitely quite unnerving. But
yeah, you know what? I really want to experience a horror game in VR. Has anyone? I mean, and chat, get involved. Let us know. But I don't know about you guys, but when I game on my PC, and sometimes I'm in the place on my own, so I've got my back to the door, and I've got my headphones on, noise cancelling headphones. I just feel so vulnerable, and if I'm playing a scary game, it just adds to the whole atmosphere of what the hell's going on. It's bizarre.
Yeah, no, that's very true. So I would recommend experiencing Resident Evil 7 in VR. I think everyone should do that just as a bucket list gaming item, because it's very unsettling.
I can imagine those early scenes that was on about in VR being terrifying.
They are terrifying. The Marguerite boss fight in VR is absolutely terrifying. It is horrible because she transforms into basically an insect, and she can crawl all over the roofs and in through the windows. And
so you got to look around,
scuttling about. Yeah, you're scuttling about, and there's the audio. It's horrible. And then obviously I'd be remiss to say, because I think this is probably the scariest thing that's been made in the last 10 years. Also, PT. You know, PT was genuinely genuinely terrifying. And again, I mean, you know, it's funny that it was excuse me, effectively a new Silent Hill. I'm nearly gone.
You feel all right?
I'm scared.
Christ, it must be terrifying. Holy shit!
He's shut his voice out.
There we go. I'm back. That's how scary PT was. It made me cry then. That's genuinely terrifying because it you know, it is a Silent Hill game effectively, or was supposed to be one. And it does exactly the things that Silent Hill 2 did, but just in a totally different environment where everything just, it's a normal environment. It's just a corridor, right, with a turn. But it plays with light and sound and creatures in a way that you just don't want to move. Like, you just don't want to progress through that environment.
You have to walk around that corner, don't you, and see what's around
there.
And the best thing that it does is that you build yourself up to get around that corner, and there's nothing there.
Yeah, there's nothing there. Yeah,
but that doesn't satisfy you, because you sort of think, something's got to happen. So yeah,
and it does have jump scares, but it didn't rely on those to make you feel afraid, which is always the best horror. Because jump scares aren't really horror; they're just, as people have said, they're just a cheap trick, and because you can put a jump scare in any genre, right? That's not what makes a horror a horror. the best horror is atmospheric horror. That plays with your mind, that's psychological, and PT just did that, as you say, Flap, where it builds you up to think, oh god, there's something around this corner, and then there's nothing, and you're like, okay, that's slight relief for about 5 seconds, and then actually, oh no, because they're gonna, something else is gonna be around, the corner when I come back round next time, or it might just happen randomly. Something's gonna happen randomly. So those are the gamut of games that have really unnerved me over the years.
I remember my
Just a
first
shame that
dabble.
we'll never get PT.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I don't suppose we ever will we? But yeah,
I
that's-
never
it is a shame.
had a chance to play the demo either, so I can't relate. Maybe my mind
just
would
buy
be
one of
different.
those PS4s on eBay for like 700 quid or something.
Yeah.
And it's okay because we're apparently getting a Bloober Silent Hill, so that's going to be that's really going to deliver exactly what we want from Silent Hill.
No, I remember my first Resident Evil 1 for me was the one that kind of got me first, really, I suppose. And to be fair, back in the early days, that was full of things like jump scares and stuff. But it was a little bit unsettling as well because, 3D environments were still pretty new. We had a CD audio soundtrack. So, I guess going back to the golden age of gaming, it was a new innovation at that time, and it really put you in that space that you'd not been in before. Has everyone played Resident Evil 1? I'm guessing they have. Does anyone remember this bastard at the very beginning?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I was talking about earlier.
that one. Yeah. He turns his head slowly around to look at you, doesn't he? It's like, oh my God. And walking down that corridor, that jump scare with the dogs jump through the window, I absolutely shit a brick. But they did that very clever thing where you have to walk down that same corridor later on in the game, and you're just waiting for it to happen, and it doesn't. And it's like, oh my God, it's a real head fuck at that moment. I love it for that. I don't think you like this one so much, Luke, but I really like Layers of Fear as well. That got me going a little bit. So you didn't like that, did you?
It's Bloober. I'm sorry, but Bloober can't. Bloober make horror games, but I don't think they actually know how to make good horror games.
It wasn't.
They just don't
it
get
wasn't. It was more like a psychological thing, really. It wasn't horror. There was a few things where you'd walk in you'd walk in and then you'd turn around and what was behind you wasn't there. It was a wall and stuff, and that was a little bit unsettling because you didn't kind of know what was coming next. And to be honest, a lot of it was implied horror. It wasn't actual horror, if that makes sense. There was a few jump scares, to be fair, but.
Yeah, there's as well. Indy pointed this game out, and I can't believe I forgot about it because it's literally one of my favorite games ever. I think it was released in like 2015. And it's a game called Soma that was made by Fractional Games, who
I think
made
Indy mentioned that.
Amnesia. Yeah, no, he prompted me on it, and that is that is a horror game. And it has horror elements. It's not like Amnesia, which I think many people would list as genuinely, one of the most terrifying games ever made. Soma is really unsettling for many reasons, but primarily because of its narrative and the topics it touches on, and it's kind of about human consciousness and how are we human? How do we live on? And all these sorts of things. And you go to environments that are very strange. It's kind of the main environment's this underwater facility, basically way underwater facility, and it's just like up until about 2020, I used to think about it every other day. That's how much of an impact its story had on me, and I think. You can get it really cheap now. You can actually, even for people who don't want the horror, you can get a mode in it where it just turns the actual horror elements off. So things like enemies that you have to avoid, etc. And you can just play it through just from a atmospheric narrative perspective. I would highly recommend that people buy that game if you are not a horror fan, because I think its story is that good and that incredible that it's so memorable and. Yeah, it's also quite scary if you play the horror stuff, but I don't remember it per se for its horror. I remember it, direct horror. I remember it for the kind of the existential questions that it asks, which are almost as terrifying as any monster. So,
I might have to check that one out.
Yeah. Soma, did you say?
It's terrific. Soma, yeah, it's terrific.
It's interesting. Does it stand for something?
I can't even remember actually. Probably, I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but it's something in game if it does stand for something. But
Okay.
yeah, it's brilliant. It's really brilliant.
Has anyone got any pets that have scared the crap out of them as well when they've been playing games? You know when pets do that thing and they stare at a corner of the room and you have no idea why they're doing that. Have you ever had that experience? It's a bit disconcerting, isn't it? Sometimes I absolutely hate that.
I've not had that, but I think now in the days of playing games with a headset on and obviously kind of losing any sense of your surroundings, there's been many times I'm not playing a horror game. I'll be playing Rocket League or something, and the missus will come home from work earlier than expected, and she'll tap us on my shoulder because I'll not heard her come in, and that gives us a bit of a jump. I think one game though actually that I didn't think of before that it's not a horror game, but it scared the shit out of me a little bit. Was the first time I came across a giant spider in Grounded.
Oh, really?
Was actually rather because of the first of all it's the noise it makes, and I think audio is obviously a massive part of anything. You can hear it before you see it, but then the first time you see one of those giant spiders, like when you just walk under a tree and it's just there, that was a little scary the first time, but it lost its impact after that. But yeah, I do distinctly remember the first time that happened.
This actually reminded me of a. Oh, sorry.
Go on.
It reminded me of a clip that I remember seeing. I think it was like maybe a number of years ago when Outlast first came out.
Yeah.
There's a streamer who a lot of people may have seen this. I imagine. I hope. But he's kind of got his green screen face in the bottom right corner, and then like he's like this really creepy, scary bit. He's walking really slowly. He's really nervous, and I think there's like a noise in the background, and you can see him physically turn his head, and he screams like the biggest little girl scream ever. And it's because his young daughter's got him through the door.
I remember that box. I know exactly.
It's such a great clip.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I'm sorry, no. I was got to say, it just reminded me of that. I thought I had to say it.
Would you be willing to play Resident Evil 7 in a dark room with? Well, the dark room wouldn't make any difference, but on your own in VR.
In VR, oh Christ!
Yeah.
Well, given what I've seen some people in the chat say and what Luke said, I don't know about on my own.
Oh, you can do it, Potts.
I probably maybe
It's not that bad. I mean, it is scary, but it's not that bad.
It is bad, but not bad.
It is bad, but not that bad. And that's the only way you got to.
I'd give it a go. I'll definitely give it a go.
Yeah, I think I'd give it a go. I mean, like you say, I love horror, but that would really scare the shit out of me, to be honest. But does it make it harder in VR?
Oh, it's gone.
Does it make it harder in VR?
In what? Probably only in the sense that you don't want to continue because he's so.
Really?
Scared.
How do you move exactly? Do you use the analog sticks on the controllers or something? Or
yeah.
Right.
Is it disorienting? Like, is it like motion sicknessy, or is it okay?
Well, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer because your mileage may vary on that. Just with VR in general, I didn't find it bad for that at all. I think it's quite a good game in terms of how it handles motion, etc. But I know there are some people that have played it and got motion sick. So yeah, I guess it just depends on how you react, and you'll only know that when you play it. Unfortunately,
I've actually not played anything in VR, so I'm
that's the future.
I'm not too sure. Is it really?
It's a future.
Yeah, well, it depends. If you ask Mark Zuckerberg, it's definitely the future, but that's maybe
But to be fair,
another topic.
I had a friend round on Friday who he's recently bought a Quest 2 and he brought it over. And since trying it, like I want one. That's how much I loved the experience. It was brilliant.
What did you play, Pucks?
We actually played some game called Acron. So it's not horror at all, but it's an interesting concept because it actually links to smartphone players. So you in the VR headset are like you're controlling like this evil tree, and you have like these golden acorns like around your like base, I guess. And then other people connect in through their phone, and they like play as squirrels. And the idea is that there's like different classes and stuff that have different actions, but through their phone, they have to try to get the acorns back to their base. But then you as the tree have like obviously your two hands and you're throwing all these massive, I don't know, like logs and stuff at them. And it was a really fun experience.
Yeah, just because that Resident Evil 4 VR remake's exclusive to Quest 2, I think, as well. So if you get one, that might be one to check out.
Yeah, well, I think my same friend, he said he's going to pick it up at some point soon. So when he does, I'll bring him round again, or I'll go round to his, and I'll see if I can give it a go, and I'll let you know.
Cool. Well, where are we with the comments?
Yeah, I've got quite a good few number here. So Pyro M says, this is quite early on. This is about like trapping younger siblings or whatever, or family members in a room. Who says, I did that to my younger cousins. They kept asking to see Resident Evil 3 on the PS1. So I set up my stereo system to have a speaker above the door behind them as stars was said by Nemesis.
Wow.
And as Luke was saying, Care Center has said, playing Resident Evil 7 in VR, the scariest thing I've ever experienced. It was too much. Similarly, with Ballman Gamer, who said, I had to stop playing Paranormal Activity VR because it nearly made me piss my pants. It scared me that much. I got I got rid of the VR after that. Clearly not for me.
Wow.
Plus, the wife said I screamed like a girl.
I really like the Paranormal Activity film. I think it's fantastic. There's the
original one at least.
The original. There's a thing that it does is it plays this. If you've got a 5.1 sound system or whatever, or at least a subwoofer, it plays this really deep bass note when something's about to happen. And it happens a few times. It kind of sets you up, but what happens is that as the film progresses, this noise will start to happen, and you know something's coming, and it's really unsettling, and you don't know what's going to happen or when it's coming. And it's just a really fantastic audio cue that something bad is about to happen. I love it for that. I really do.
Yeah.
I can't be honest, I didn't realise it was a game. I didn't realise it was a VR version. That does sound scary.
Funny story about Paranormal Activity. I went on a date with somebody to see Paranormal Activity at the cinema once, and I didn't do myself any favors. It's fair to say that was the only date we went on, because that actually, just thinking about it, that did make me because that's the one where not much happens. Well, I'm trying to remember, but it just gives you sort of a constant sense of anxiety and dread that has you on edge throughout the whole movie. That's definitely not a movie to go and take somebody on a date with. Definitely.
What's your take on it, Luke? Do you like Paranormal Activity?
The first one, because it does that again. It does that horror thing. It's just atmospheric. I think even though it's not, it has the same concept. The found footage stuff before it was overplayed was incredibly compelling. That's why Blair Witch is probably one of the best horror things ever made. Because
I'm pleased you said that. I'm so pleased you said that because that's a real Marmite film for people. I absolutely love Blair Witch because it's the closest. It's the closest you can get to reading a book, because when you read a book, you're just visualizing it all in your mind. And for me, Blair Witch is the same. You don't actually see anything, so you've got to imagine what the hell it is they're seeing, and it makes it scarier.
It does. Yeah, I always say for horrors, telling and not showing can often be scarier than just the showing. And Blair Witch, and the first Paranormal Activity do that really well, where they don't they don't show you a whole lot. They just leave the gaps of your imagination to run wild and kind of worry about it, and that's really good horror. That's when it's really good. And a lot of games like Silent Hill does that as well. It's kind of leaves you to interpret stuff and think about it. So, first Paranormal Activity, really good.
Oh, I'm pleased you like Blair Witch, because I was going to ask you about that, and I wasn't sure what you was going to say, because like I say, it's a real divisive film, but I really like it. I like it.
Love it. I always watch it at least once a year. I love it.
Does it still hold up, Luke?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Because it holds up really well. Because first of all, obviously the concept was wholly original then, but because it doesn't use any visual effects at all, and it's all practical effects, and even the practical effects it shows you are minimal. There's barely anything. It still holds up amazingly well, and just the way that they filmed that, and a lot of the dialogue is ad-libbed, and it's just it's brilliant. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. It doesn't get enough credit, I think, that it probably deserves. Totally agree.
That final scene when you go down in a basement, he's just facing the wall. That's such a chilling moment. I hate.
It's horrible. Yeah, it's horrible, and it's nothing. It's just a guy in a corner. It's nothing, but it's horrible. Yeah.
Fantastic. What's your take on that, Pucks? Do you like Blair Witch?
I've never actually seen the original film, if I'm perfectly honest, so I can't comment, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit before my time, to be fair.
Well, I don't know about that, but I don't know if you would enjoy it now like we did back in the day, if that makes sense, because it was kind of new, this whole sort of, found footage thing. It's been done a little bit now, and you're probably used to the concept, but interesting.
I still think it does it better than any other
Yeah,
film
no, I agree.
that's come
Absolutely
since.
agree. Yeah. What else we got in the chat, Pucks?
Yeah, a few more things. Indie Gamer says, yep, definitely agreeing with Luke. Much prefer psychological horror or thriller. This is regarding PT. Yeah, Kay Asante says you can find a PT remake very well done in PlayStation's Dreams.
Wow.
Apparently.
Oh, nice.
So if you need to try it, it might be a way to give it a go.
Dreams isn't free, is it? There was a paid game, wasn't
No.
it? Dreams.
No.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
What else have I got here? Wandering Duchess said, I've got a horror currently ongoing, lads. Cable management.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we all know that.
Bane of everyone. Invader Gaming says, worst scare? The Red Ring of Death on my 360.
Yeah, you had that as well, didn't you? I had the Red Ring of Death.
I did.
On mine
I had
as
it
well.
twice, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that as well. Yeah.
And
Just had
last
to make
one.
sure you had a towel
Yep.
nearby at all times.
That actually did work for a brief period.
Last one I have here from my very own Luke Steele, who says, the real horror is knowing that current Ubisoft are rebooting Splinter Cell.
That is scary.
Never a truer word spoken.
Ubisoft have crept up a few times tonight, not in the good way either. But, no, well, on that note, I think we'll end this topic there, and thank you very much, everyone involved. Really, really enjoyed getting into that. I do enjoy these kind of confessionals and kind of going slightly off topic to a certain degree. Fantastic. We really enjoyed tonight's show. Thank you everyone for tuning in and listening to the GPG Sunday podcast on Halloween 2021. This game footage is Back for Blood. Like I say, sadly it's not my game footage. It is Jack Fragg's, and like I say, we'll leave a link to his channel down below. Quite a prolific YouTuber, so I'm sure most people know him. Plays a lot of what does he play? Battlefield and things like that. So fantastic chat. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Always a pleasure. So a couple of new names in the chat tonight. Fantastic panel. As always, thank you very much for tonight's topics. I never know how long the topics, how many, what kind of legs that these topics are going to have. But you guys always bring the fire. I'm really grateful for your opinions and knowledge that you bring to the topics. I think you mentioned, Scott, that would it be worth doing a midweek special on Halo nearer the launch, and I absolutely think that would be worth doing. And we can get that set up. So if you're willing to do that, my friend, I'm sure we can get that sorted. I'm guessing that
definitely. I
would
think
be you and
that'd be
Luke.
great.
You and Luke are going to be the best ones for that.
I think it'll be good for us all to jump in from different perspectives. We could maybe talk about Halo Battle Royale and things like that. Maybe make it a little spicy,
That will certainly spice up the chat. Yeah, no, that's for sure. So yeah, Pucks and I will tag along for that one if that's okay. Now, excellent. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. Hope you've enjoyed the show. We will be doing this again next week with any luck. Hope you have a safe and good week of gaming. And until the next show, we'll see you on the next one.